What's going on? This is Byron Cook. I am the host of A Dose of Positive. And thank you for checking out our YouTube channel. The idea is really simple. I want you to feel good. I want you to learn from successful people who are at the top of their game. They're going to give you usable bits of information that can help you lift your life. Let's do this together. Enjoy. Well, I'm excited to announce that this is the first doctor in the history of A Dose of Positive. Now, I will admit it's episode 3, but still, welcome. Dr. Sarah Rav, welcome to A Dose of Positive.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
I'm so excited. This has been a little while in the making because launching this has taken me a while and in the early stages of thinking about the sorts of people I wanted on this podcast and on this YouTube channel. Hi, point at the camera, say hi. There it is. You were one of the people that I thought, wouldn't it be great to get Sarah Rav on? I discovered you on Instagram like so many people have. And your line of work, obviously, yes, you're a medical doctor and you just graduated in December, so congratulations.
Thank you, very exciting.
But your line of work now, amongst other things, including being an actual doctor, right, is you're a productivity master. And productivity is a massive part of what I want this podcast to bring to people. It's all about how can we be better? What can we learn from successful people? And I think in the area of productivity, you're literally running courses on productivity. We can talk about productivity. So I'm stoked that you're here from that point of view. I know I could be a lot more productive. I probably took too long to plan. Was I doing a bit too much back and forward in even just arranging for us to do the podcast? Could I be more efficient?
Look, I mean, there's always an element of, having small talk and having conversations. So
what was I doing too much small talk?
No. I think that's a good thing.
Oh boy.
You have to, you can't just be like, hey, do you want to come and do the podcast and have that as your first message?
Is there a bit too much waffle in there though?
Nah.
Okay, no, I'm just checking. No, so anyway, the point is, we will get to a full episode around productivity in a month or so on this show, and that's where you'll really come into your own in terms of some of the skills that you've acquired along your journey as a student. You've mentored other young students and you've helped them with their study, and I think it can translate to adults in the real world, not just students studying the all-important degrees and VCEs and all those things. But first up, I thought we would get to know you because to be honest, I'm hoping you're someone that drops in every, 8 or 10 weeks. If this isn't a disaster, you're someone I'd like to join us now and then, right?
I'm sure it won't be a disaster.
Okay, good.
The first 2 episodes are anything to go by.
Thank you. Well, wow. Flattery will get you everywhere. Thank you so much. No, it's to understand your story because your personal story in itself is a story of positivity because you've shown resilience and you've overcome some really significant obstacles to the point you're sitting here now. Your social media following, and we don't use social media as a sole KPI for success because I think once there was an egg on Twitter that had 1 million followers. It was just an egg.
Yeah.
So we can't get too carried away with this stuff. But having said that, it's then what you do with it. You have chosen to use social media, particularly Instagram and TikTok, to connect with people, to give them information, to impart your knowledge, to be vulnerable, and in doing so, I want you to flex a little bit. What are your numbers like on Instagram and stuff? Roughly, like how many followers and all that kind of good stuff?
Okay, well, I always say that, followers and the numbers don't really matter, but it's about the amount, the influence that you have and the impact you have. But since you asked.
Yeah, and I also pointed that out. So we've both made that disclaimer now.
Yeah.
1.2 million on Instagram and 1.4 million on TikTok.
Great. So, and me, for example, I'm not on both. So I'm not saying it means it's 2.6 total, but it's definitely more than 1.4 total because there's a lot of people that are unique to one or the other. So, it might be 2 million people.
The demographic is very different on TikTok versus Instagram, I find.
Yeah. So there you are. You've built up a following over the years. You were one of the first to jump on Instagram 7 years ago, and you were using it for certain things, and it's evolved because of the story that you're about to tell. So let's cut to the chase. How did you first start out on Instagram? You would have been a 15-year-old girl. What were you doing in those early days of Insta, Sarah?
Well, back in the day when I was in year 8, year 9, I was really into fitness. I was really into weightlifting, nutrition, stuff like that, meal prepping, getting enough sleep, drinking enough water during the day. And my friends knew me as this sort of fit, motivated individual at school, and Instagram was just an up-and-coming thing at the time. So one of my friends suggested that I should start an Instagram account because they always asked me for tips and they thought maybe, people from around the world would want to benefit from those tips as well. So that was what I was doing initially. I was posting about the sort of fitness tips that I knew. Yeah.
Right. And so 7 years ago, that was unique. Now I feel that's every Instagram account in the world.
Yeah.
But back then that was unique and different. And so, okay, so you're out there, you're fit, you're 15, so you've still got a lot to learn about the way the world works, but you're putting out information. I'm sure you're pretty responsible, you're smart. It would have been relatively solid information backed up by science and all that stuff. But along the way, which I found really interesting and confronting, was your own role, I suppose, as an influencer in that space where you had to show a certain image because that's what you do. It's a visual medium. You got obsessed, didn't you? And this is where the trouble starts. But you didn't necessarily see it coming. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely. I think the way, it was a big part of my life. I was posting almost every day. When I wasn't posting, I was looking through my feed to find things that I could post. I was following a lot of fitness models whose full-time job was to work out, to eat well, to look a certain way,
right,
who would do shoots in magazines with lighting, with, maybe Photoshop with the right angles and everything. And so that was what I was just overwhelmed with every day. And that was what I thought I had to be like in order to do well on the platform.
Okay, and so then it gets obsessive and you don't necessarily realise, but it's going too far. You are pushing and pushing, and this is where a dose of positive as a concept needs to almost issue a disclaimer. Be careful when you're pursuing great things, when you're setting goals for yourself, because you weren't just setting physical goals because of your Instagram profile. You're obviously also a student. You excelled in academia. You were setting all sorts of goals for yourself at that time. It's just a 15-year-old putting huge amounts of pressure on yourself. It was too much. It was an overdose of positive, right? Like you actually went crazy. You went bananas on positive.
Yeah.
Give me some examples of the sorts of things the sorts of goals you were setting for yourself that you probably realised in hindsight were ridiculous and unattainable.
Yeah. So one thing, and this is probably the biggest regret of my life. I was so set on getting a 99.95 ATAR at the end of year 12. Like that was my goal, my focus. I gave up a lot to try and get there.
Which puts you, for those who aren't familiar with the system,
yes,
that puts you in the top 0.05% of the state of Victoria, right?
Yeah, it's Well,
I guess it's national university admissions, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you're trying to be at the absolute top of the top of the top of the top, which I suppose is a healthy goal in a sense, or is it?
Okay, so the way I see it was like, I tell my students, you're never going to get a 99.95 if you don't aim for it, but it's not the end of the world. But for me, it almost felt like it was the end of the world. So when I received my ATAR come like in December after I'd finished all my studies, and I got a 99.90, one below the 99.95, I was in tears. And looking back now, I think that is absolutely absurd, because if you told anybody that they got a 99.9 ATAR, they would be over the moon. Whereas I was in tears. And so when I tell people that story, they're like, what is doing? Like, what? And I would have gotten into medical school with, I didn't even need a 99.9 to get into medical school. I'm sure I could have gotten a lower mark. But I had created this goal for myself, and it was just that or nothing. And so now looking back, I'm like, why was I so hard on myself? Why did I give up so much in my year 11 and 12 just for a number that I didn't really need? And
now that you're sitting here as a doctor and as a grown-up and talking to another grown-up, What's interesting, if you think about just the whole system, and I'm not trying to get you put you offside with universities, because I know you work with a lot of universities.
No, but I have a lot to say about that as well.
Good. Well, let's talk about it a little bit, because in searching for positive outcomes, we can at least ask questions of some of these things. So I believe personally, when you're pursuing goals and you're trying to make better of yourself, like I'll give you just a really practical example right now. I have really committed myself, not in an obsessive, unhealthy way, but I've really committed myself to my own physical fitness over the last 2 to 3 months. But in doing that, I've got a personal trainer, Amadou. Mad shout out to you, Amadou. I'm working very hard. I'm pretty strict on my nutrition, and I love it. But guess what? It's me versus me, right? Like I have mates that play footy, like Mad Jack Dawes, a mate of mine. And we sort of laugh about the fact that what I'm benching and I think is amazing is his warm-up. But, exactly, it's his warm-up, because he is one of the most notoriously buff AFL players ever, and I'm old mate from the radio station, a DJ. But me versus me, that is success. I am just against myself to set goals for myself, not in relation to everybody else. Now, the university admissions process literally pits kids up against each other, right? To the point, admittedly, you're at the absolute extreme end of this, a girl who gets 99.9 is upset. That system is wrong, as well as your attitude was wrong, but the system is also wrong.
I think in high school, that's all you know. It's like that's what you're, it's like make or break. It'll make your future. It'll define your future. But what a lot of high school students don't realize is that there's lots of different pathways to get to the career that you want. So even if I didn't get into undergrad medicine, I could have done a biomed degree and then gone into postgrad medicine. Or I could have, even if I didn't get into a bachelor's degree, I could have done a diploma, could have gone. There's so many different ways. And if you're passionate and set on a career, one exam or one mark doesn't just suddenly seal that off.
Great. And that is going to take a huge amount of pressure off students, but anyone, I think when goals are set in this framework of you versus everybody else, and they're simply, with that logic, there has to be a winner and there actually has to be a loser. That's the sad part about it. So even in that system, if everybody applied themselves brilliantly, someone's still going to get a 20 and under because they were the lowest, but they might have done really well, but they're going to feel like a flop, aren't they?
Yeah, and I think for me, one thing that I practice and one thing that I try to encourage others to practice is being compassionate to yourself. So it's all good and well to push yourself to your very best. But at the end of the day, as long as you know that you tried your best, it doesn't matter what score you got, it doesn't matter what the outcome was, as long as you know that you tried your best, and then you should have the compassion to be able to, be happy for yourself, be proud of yourself. Because you tried your best.
Well, I'm glad we agree on that. I know I got slightly sidetracked there, but it's an important part of this journey. So you're obsessive about your academic results, but you're also on the physical side obsessive to the point that you end up with an eating disorder. So without doing a 1 hour tell all about the eating disorder, because you've done that interview 100 times, that can be found elsewhere. At what point did you go, ooh, okay, this is a major issue that I have to overcome? Because I know that you were sort of denying it along the way.
Yeah, and so I guess one of the things about eating disorders is, and one thing about mental illnesses itself is that a lot of patients don't have insight because it's their own mind. So to them, it seems like it's a normal cognition, it's a normal behavior. So for me, the big eye-opening moment was when I was actually asked to take a year off university because I was so unwell. And that's when...
Wow. Yeah. So who asks you to do that? Like the chancellor or something?
Yeah. There was a few, the faculty in general.
Wow.
There's a few different key players. But they decided that it was best for my mental and physical health to take some time off studying and actually just work on myself and work on getting better.
So a university has literally intervened, and as it turns out, that's a good decision.
It was,
because where you are now is testament to the fact that this path has worked. But it's interesting. Was that purely based on your appearance? Like, did they go, wow, you're looking thin, take a year off? Or was it far more complicated than that?
So, unfortunately, I think, like, if looking back, and this is of course no fault to anyone, it's just how do you know that somebody's struggling? If I didn't look so unhealthy, would they have known? I don't know. Right. Obviously, there's lots of different ways that mental health can show up in work and in school. You know, more sick days, not engaging well, isolation and stuff. But whether or not anybody would have picked it up if I didn't look that unwell is a question in itself. And that's a scary thing, because then it means that people have to get as unwell as I was before people start taking notice.
So to come back to that obsessive nature, which now you've overcome, and you've found that lovely balance between achieving things and not being crazy about it. But you're obsessing over the exam results and all of those things. Now you don't just suddenly end up, looking like a university has to intervene and ask you to take a year off. It doesn't just happen. What was the thought process? Keeping in mind you were doing the Instagram, a very visual person, getting lots of likes, getting attention for looking good and for wanting to keep your body fat percentage at whatever it is, 0.00, way too low, right?
Way too low, yep.
So was it just as simple as being obsessed over appearance, or was there more to it? So what led to it?
Yep. And so for me, it was a lot about control. I didn't step on the scale once in that sort of 3-year period where I lost weight. I didn't really look or analyze myself in the mirror. It was very much about, this is the person I am. This is my identity. I am the person who eats well, who exercises every day. And so for me, it was all about maintaining that. It's hard to explain, but basically, like, I was counting calories using a calorie tracker, and it was always about hitting that goal, that number, and never going over it. And it was always about running a certain distance, because that was the distance that I set for myself. It didn't matter if I was tired. It didn't matter if, it didn't matter if I didn't have the energy. That was the distance, and that was how much I was going to run.
So it's the 99.95 all over again.
Yes.
Just in a different way, manifesting itself in a different way.
Yeah.
All right, so there's the intervention, you seek treatment, you end up in hospital, and from there the bounce back begins, I would imagine, but it starts from a hospital bed, right?
It starts from a hospital bed. It starts from a terrified, tiny little girl sitting alone with an oncologist as my treating doctor. Because it was a general medical.
What does an
ward.
oncologist do again for people not in the medical profession?
Cancer. So they specialize in cancer. So
did they think you had cancer?
No. So they didn't think I had cancer, but I thought I had cancer because nobody told me my diagnosis until I was discharged. So I was sitting there, and again, I had no insight. Didn't know why I was in hospital. Didn't know why these people wouldn't let me stand up. But turns out because my electrolytes were really unbalanced, and
Gee,
so
man. Okay.
it was my whole body chemistry was off whack. But I felt like I was very left in the dark, and so I was terrified, didn't know what was wrong with me, and then I received my diagnosis, and it was almost like a light switch, like a light flicked on or something. It was like I never would have in a million years thought that, because it was never about weight and about weight loss, but it also just made so much sense suddenly.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you were obsessed with the results and the numbers and the figures, and it wasn't about that. But
appearance per se.
Right.
Yeah.
But then it was about that, as it turns out. All right. So, and this is where we're a dose of positive. I mean, I just think it's important to make it clear as to where you were, because that's where we can now shine a light on getting through it. And this can be applied to anyone who's had to overcome any obstacle, whether it be health or otherwise. People say this about addiction particularly. It's the acknowledgement of the issue that starts that turning point, right?
Yep. And sometimes it's hard to receive that diagnosis and to admit it. But if you don't admit it, then you can't work to fixing it, because, what are you fixing if you don't know what you're fixing? Does it? Yeah.
So you knew you had it, you accepted that the diagnosis was a real diagnosis, and then you start to take steps to get through this. Now, here we are, it's 2022, and you're in an amazing place in your life. What year was this when you literally accepted the fact that you had an eating disorder, you're in a hospital bed, and went, right, okay, now we've got to get on with trying to get out of this. What year was that?
That was 2018, so 4 years ago.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So here we are 4 years later. Let's talk about the bounce back. What have been the steps along the way that have brought you back? I mean, you clearly will have returned to university. I mean, uni will have given you that year to get better.
Yep.
That process will have played out. So you're back on campus, right?
Yep. So there was obviously the process associated with eating disorder recovery, and I think maybe I won't go too much in depth about that because I have in other podcasts. But one thing I really wanted to focus and talk about today is the fact that I had to take a year off university, and to me it felt like the end of the world. It felt like I was suddenly a failure and I was behind all my friends. They were going to graduate in the year above me. And people would be asking like, oh, why are you in our year now? And like, did you fail a year or something? So all that stuff. And I thought it was the biggest setback.
Yeah.
But now in the grand scheme of things, it was that like taking that year off probably saved my life, you know?
Oh, wow.
And it's like,
wow.
And it's like, what is one extra year for maybe another 50 years in medicine?
It's funny, isn't it? Because time is an interesting commodity. I'm older than you, and so I have grown to realise a year actually is nothing. You blink and it's a year, right?
Yeah.
Whereas when you are younger and you're a high achiever, I actually can understand that lack of perspective that a year would be like, oh my, wow. You know, I can't remember who said it. Many people have said it. One of my relatives will have said it. Life is a marathon, not a sprint, right? And here you are now 4 years down the road doing brilliantly well, and realise that it's okay. In fact, taking the year off was a great thing.
Yeah, it was. And like I learned so much in that year, not just about how to put processes in place that will keep me well mentally and physically, but also so much about, you know, my friends, about my family, about how to enjoy things that aren't just about ticking boxes and boosting your CV.
Great.
That was probably the most important thing I learned out of that.
Because, and this is, and you're such a good guest to have early on, because I feel like you'll gravitate to this podcast if you want to achieve things. Someone who has no interest in doing well isn't going to go, oh, I should listen to a dose of positive. They're just not, right? So with that comes a responsibility. If I'm here speaking to successful people every week and we're all getting fired up and we're all getting inspired, we just need to take note of your story to make sure we don't get too fired up.
Yeah.
You know, there are limits to how much you want to go, you know. And so you've gone too far. Now you're still what I would describe as a high achiever, but not an obsessed high achiever. What were some of the tools that you used along the way to get to where you are now? And can we touch on the importance of a support network and of friends?
Yeah. So I would say that my friends and family had one of the biggest roles in my recovery. That being said, so when I was unwell and I was not studying and I was just focused on getting better, my friends and family were there to support me the entire time. They never once thought any less of me for having the eating disorder, for having to stop uni, for, you know, having to rely on them to drive me to places because I was so unwell. And to that showed me that I am like, that just completely shattered the wall for me, because I had always thought that people only liked me because of my achievements. People only liked me because of my grades, because of
that's huge.
My numbers on Instagram. And then when I had nothing, like absolutely nothing, when I was at my very bottom, those people still showed up for me. And so to me, that was like, wow, maybe I don't have to, you know, get a 99.95 for people to like me or for people to find me worthy. Maybe it's actually just my personality that people like.
Wow, that is massive. And that pin drop moment when you realize that must have been so powerful for you to go, oh shit, the way I was thinking was so damaging to myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. But it's so positive to come out of that and go, oh, right, okay. Like I could have no likes on Instagram, or, you know, I could be, oh, God forbid, an 88.5 or something even. Whoa, imagine that.
Still a very good score.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Because exactly. I mean, because it's all just so, there's nothing wrong with wanting to achieve, but we can get so silly about it. It can all just be so ridiculous and almost not funny. I mean, there's nothing funny about what you've been through, but elements of it are a tiny bit funny when you look back and go, did I really think like that?
Yeah.
But it's great. that you know.
Well, it's good that I learned, I think.
Yeah.
And I think that was a big learning opportunity for me, and it sort of shifted my priorities going into where I am today. And I think it's one of the reasons why, sure, you know, some people would call me successful in terms of the work that I do on the side, but if you look at other aspects of my life, it is all there, you know, it is also so rich in terms of my friendships, in terms of my hobbies, my creativity. All that stuff is just as important to me as, you know, doing well at work, if that makes sense, or doing well in my career.
I'm already seeing a through line. It's very early in the history of this podcast, and I'm you know, I'm obviously very excited about what the future holds. But I'm already seeing a through line. Like, here you are, very driven, very motivated, over 2 million followers on the various social media platforms, doing your thing. And you're saying it's important to be able to switch off. I had the same sentiments from the Sydney Swans All-Australian, one of my favourite footy players, Isaac Heaney, who joined me. And one of his key bits of advice, and mind you, this is a very driven individual, one of the hardest workers in the Australian Football League, in the All-Australian team, in the best 22, trains harder than anyone. One of his biggest pieces of advice, one of his takeouts of the whole episode was, also find something away from that you love. Find your escape. Find that. And I could learn from that. I need more escapes because I love what I do, and I find that I'm fortunate. I probably need to get better at that. What are some of your escapes? Because you live professionally in hospitals, but then on social media when you're not in hospitals, and you know, universities teaching other students how to be productive. What is your escape? I mean, could you get better at that, or have you sort of mastered some of that stuff now?
Funnily enough, when I was unwell, like when I one of my very first sessions with my psychologist, she was like, "So what do you like to do outside of studying, gymming, and like eating well and like posting on Instagram?" And I was like, "I don't know." And she was like, "You have no," like, she was like,
I bet you,
do you not have hobbies that like aren't just ticking boxes? And I was like, I don't. But now I can easily say it. Like, I love singing. I will 100% go for karaoke anytime.
Right, mainly Tay-Tay, right?
Oh yeah.
Loves to sell some Tay-Tay.
Justin, but yeah, definitely Taylor. And then things like, I love having dinner parties. So we'll pick a theme, like an Italian night, or, you know, like Mediterranean, and we'll just whip up a storm in the kitchen. I love watching just movies with my partner, all that stuff, I think. And also just like hanging out with my friends. I'm a lot closer now to my family than I was in the past, because now I realize that, like, you know, I should make time. Well, I'm not should, but I want to make time for them.
Yeah.
Rather than spending my life at work or doing other stuff that's productive.
Yeah, and what I notice about all of those things is, whilst you still retain an image and you do a brilliant job on the socials, and you're still you know, committed to your health and wellness and fitness and all of that, and we can talk about, you know, some of the ways you've gone about that. None of your hobbies, if you will, none of the things that are a release for you are particularly physical. Like, you're not hiking or doing triathlons. You know, like it's different enough to your other stuff that I guess it is a genuine release. I reckon if you were an Instagram influencer that was famous for being in the gym, and someone said, "What's your hobby?" "Well, I do an outdoor version of the gym." It's kind of like, well, no, that doesn't count. So it's different enough, isn't it? Something like a dinner party literally has nothing to do with being a doctor or being an influencer, right?
Yeah, and I think, you know, like, obviously I like going to the gym and I do enjoy that part of it, but it is not my whole life. And yeah, I think these things make me happy in a different sort of way. There's a lot of like creativity in it, I think, more so than what exercise has. Exercise sure is an outlet, but this is a different sort of outlet.
And one thing I love, and I don't want to focus on it too much, because again, there's been other forums for that conversation, but in working through these challenges, and you know, we've spoken about some of the ways in which you've done that, the support of friends and family, realizing that you could be loved for things other than marks and Insta likes and shares or
awards
whatever. Awards. So realizing that I might actually have a value outside of that, and really processing that and feeling so good about it, feeling loved. Yeah. Right. That stuff's all important, but I do think just the practical aspect of you getting through that eating disorder. your relationship with food would now be really positive, and I don't know if you'd ever be triggered or anything, or whether you just fully are through that and you're able to have a positive relationship with food.
I think, look, it's 4 years on, and I will say I still sometimes have thoughts that I identify as my eating disorder speaking up, right? Like, if I'm out at dinner, I'll be like there will be a glimpse in my mind where it's like, oh, the salad's better for you than the burger. It's like stuff like that will flick through my mind. But I think I'm a lot better at pushing that thought aside.
Good.
And not adding any moral value to the foods that I choose.
Yep.
So whilst in my head it might be like, oh yeah, the salad is more nutritious than the cheeseburger. In my head it's like, yeah, but I eat well most of the time. If I want a cheeseburger in this moment in time, that does not make me a bad person. That does not make me unhealthy or unworthy.
Interesting, because one of my favorite podcasts, and he was definitely an influence on me choosing this new direction for mine, is called The Mindset Mentor, a guy called Rob Dial in the US. And he speaks about the importance of having that self-dialogue, and he believes that you can actually speak to your own mind. So you could talk to yourself. Maybe try not to do it out loud because you might look a bit kooky, right? But that's literally what you're doing, and that's what I find myself doing in certain situations. And I think that is a positive message. It's like, don't let something be the boss. You could actually talk to your own mind. I know that sounds crazy, but like in your case, you've gone, oh, hang on, no, Sarah's mind. That's the way you used to talk. No, we're not going to do that. And you tell your mind to stop it.
Well, even stronger than that, one thing that I was taught by my psychologist is to think of those thoughts as your eating disorder. So it's not you.
It's not even you.
Yeah,
Great.
It's not a part of you. It is your illness, and that is something that you're fighting, but it isn't you.
Yeah.
And that helps sort of distinguish it even more.
Great. Yeah, and I know for me, like, if I am ever, because I live, I mean, we're broadcasting from my apartment here in the city of Melbourne, and this is my pad as well. I live as a bachelor, and sometimes it's a bit dangerous just being with yourself all the time, and the self dialogue and the chat, and sometimes you've got to say, "Oi, whoa, don't be thinking like that. We're not going to do that today." So I thought that might be a trick, and then you've obviously managed to separate yourself from your eating disorder. It's like, I'm Sarah, that's the eating disorder. They're two different things.
And of course, you don't have to have a mental illness, but you could be like, that's the part of me I want to leave behind.
Yeah.
That's the part of me I don't want to listen to.
Yeah.
And you can separate yourself from that part. And sure, that part will pop up from time to time, but that's not who you want to be. So you push it to the side, sort of thing.
We're as long as you've had fun, you're definitely going to come back to do a whole thing about productivity. Yeah. We will learn about how you got yourself into a position now where you literally run courses on how we can all be productive, because we haven't even touched on that, but that's good because it means we've got something to do next time. But I finish every episode on this, so what we do next time, I'm not sure. You'll have to make it relate to productivity. Okay. But I finish every episode.
I'll have to think about it.
No, and look, there's no pressure for this to suddenly be the most inspiring sort of Martin Luther King style speech ever. But I'm gonna put you on the spot and ask you this to answer this. Someone's listening to this right now and they want to do better. They want to be better. Maybe they've had a bit of a tough run in life, but they're listening to this because they're like, oh, that Byron bloke's doing a podcast about positivity. Sarah Rav, someone who is successful, someone who's been through adversity, who's overcome obstacles. What would you say to someone right now who's in that position generally in their life? Give them a dose of positive.
So I think the most important lesson that I want people to know is that you will be with yourself for, you're going to be there for the rest of your life. It's you against the world sort of thing. You will always be there for you. And so you owe it to yourself to try your best, whether that is in whatever goal you have in life. Try your best and be happy at the end of the day that you have tried your best. No matter what the results are, at least you did your very best. You owe that to yourself.
That's great. Yeah. And because part of what we've spoken about today is what happens when you're not happy with your best.
Yes.
When your best isn't enough and you start the self-loathing and other problems can arise. Yeah. That's the lesson there. So we're striving, we're pushing because we're positive people, but when we do our best, by the way, it's a realistic best.
Yeah.
It's not an unrealistic expectation. When we do our best, whether it's a game of footy and we did our best but we still lost, that's okay.
Because you did your best.
Right.
And nobody in the crowd, your friends, your family, won't think any less of you because you lost. No. They know you did your best.
You're great. All right. For those who want to get around everything that you're doing, gratuitous plug time. Let's put out all of the handles and any other links to the productivity courses that you're offering and to all the other things you're doing. You know, I definitely want you to come back to talk about productivity in a month or so. But yeah, please, Sarah, throw it out there.
So both my Instagram and TikTok accounts are at Sarah Rav, SarahRav. You can find the links to my productivity masterclass in those accounts. But honestly, if you guys want to catch up, touch base, ask questions, my DMs are always open and I'm always happy to have a discussion. Otherwise, the other thing I want to say is if you feel like you're suffering from a mental health disorder or some of the things we talked about sort of bring up some sort of distress in you, please talk to a professional, a mental health professional, because there is no shame in doing that.
Yeah, well said. Another great resource for anyone experiencing related issues is Lifeline, 13 11 14, and they also have online resources as well. This might date when we recorded the podcast, but I did notice you're going to be at one of my favourite places in Melbourne, Ballers Clubhouse, for a Taylor Swift listening party. Can I please come?
Dude, of course you can.
I just love Taylor.
It's going to be the drop of her 10th album.
Amazing.
Yeah.
See, look, this has nothing to do with a dose of positive, but just it's a nice fun finish.
Yeah.
One of my favourite things, I've been in radio now, music industry for 20 years. One of the most joyous things I was able to do with the late Michael Gudinski was travel to Taylor Swift on her Red tour. Yeah, her Red tour. And I went to Detroit to see her Red tour with Gudinski and all of his people because the idea was if a few of the radio people in Australia had seen the show, we would then talk it up on the radio in Australia and help sell tickets. I mean, that's just the way the system works. Yeah. We got there and Taylor Swift's mum, Andrea, is an absolute sweetheart, just a wonderful woman. And Taylor Swift's mum, Andrea, would walk around this giant stadium
and pick out
hand picking fans to join us, and I was at the pizza party after the gig.
No, I'm so jealous.
It was a pizza party with Andrea, with Taylor, all of her people, and just fans that were hand picked. Yeah. And also I would say this about her, she was the most professional, switched on. I'd interviewed her the day before, remembered exactly who I was when she was driving past in the golf cart. She's like, Byron, you win the award for the person that's travelled the furthest to interview me. Well done. And it's just like hundreds of thousands of people have interviewed you, but you know people's names. Yeah. She's a great chick.
Do you know I have a I haven't added to it in a while, but I have this like scrapbook, and it's like it's like of letters that I've written to Taylor.
Oh wow, this is amazing.
And so my mum made me stop going to her concerts because after every concert I would just break down into tears and she would have to like drag me to the car.
Oh, you are brave. You must be in a comfortable place to admit that. No. Oh my God, I just realised, holy shit. I did the same before I got into radio. I once wrote a letter to Kylie Minogue. It was during her Nick Cave indie era, and I thought she was the coolest thing in the world. And I felt like we would be really great friends. And I wrote a letter.
Did she
I don't know if she ever got it. I hope she doesn't hear this. It's damn right embarrassing.
No, it's not.
No, it's not. It's great.
Not.
You know what? It shows that we've got a bit of passion. Yeah. Why not?
I'm a fan.
That's great. Okay, well we'll go to that because her new album is going to be just straight fire. Let's face it.
Yeah, it's going to be rock.
Yeah. Rock? She's going to rock out.
Yeah, that's the genre.
Because Red was her last bit of, she went a little bit country. Yeah. Well, she was always a lot country. Yeah. Then she was a bit less country. And then she became poppy. Okay. Anyway, that was a dose of Tay-Tay at the end there. Yeah. Thanks, Sarah. And we'll get you back in again. Please do like and subscribe. If you're watching this on YouTube, did I do okay? See, there's the camera there. And then there's the camera there. Whoops, my hand got in the way. But anyway, you can watch us on YouTube or, of course, all the platforms, iHeart, Spotify, Apple Podcast. A 5-star review would be really appreciated. And we'll talk to you next week on A Dose of Positive. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.